Hello.
And there we go.
How are you?
Very good. I apologize for the mix-up there.
Well, we are quite a pair because I was not on top of it either. So we should not rule the world.
Well, I sent that email thinking, oh, okay, this will give her all the basic information she needs, and there's going to be the link on there. And then I realized I'd sent that without even putting the link attached to it. So my bad.
I never saw your first email, so I'm not.
Then it wouldn't have made a difference I'd put that on there or not.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna start us off here with an introduction. I was just saying to the camera a minute ago, I was saying that we have with us a real OG of the health freedom movement today, Ginger Taylor. And I didn't know this about you until I got your bio, that you had a bachelor's in psychology, a master's in clinical counseling from Johns Hopkins.
Mm-hmm.
Ginger has been around for a long time in this movement.
Mm-hmm.
One of the originals from this movement, which is kind of hard because if you really think about it, the movement's been around for hundreds of years, right? Since the very first vaccine was ever created, there's been people protesting. So for the modern movement, we'll say, co-author of Vaccine Epidemic: How Corporate Greed, Biased Science, and Coercive Government Threaten Our Human Rights, Our Health, and Our Children. Big time on the web with lots of websites and blog activity. We're going to go through that today. And 2014 recipient of the National Health Federation's Health Freedom Hero Award. And if you're not familiar with that, that is something that Representatives Dan Burton and Representatives Ron Paul have also won in the past. So we're going to get more into your background. Ginger, welcome to the Flipside. I'm really excited to have you here.
And thanks for the invitation. I really appreciate it. It has been a long time and a lot of great stuff has happened. So it's good to be able to talk to like the new people coming in and people coming in from other perspectives. And we old moms are kind of the keeper of a lot of information that have happened in the last 20, 30 years that the public doesn't know because we didn't have a big enough megaphone yet. So thank you for having me on, and let's talk about the history of this.
Yeah, you hit the nail right on the head with that opening remark. And that is one of the questions I want to get into after we find out a little bit about your background. And that is this whole new wave of people that have come into this reality of ours now. I know your story starts in the early 2000s, or what do they call it now? The aughts.
Yeah.
I still am not used to that word. So it sounds strange coming off my tongue. I used it last night and my wife just looked at me and she's like you're getting hip or something. But you know, my entry into this world was not the same as yours. Yours was, and I'm speaking for you, so please correct me, but it's almost like you were thrown into it head first. Mine came based on information and research. I was getting a fellowship in pediatrics and chiropractic, and one of the people teaching the program basically said, you know, challenge yourself to look at both sides of the vaccine issue, and gave us information, and that led me down a rabbit hole. And that was 1990. Wow, that was probably 1998.
Okay.
So that was a long time ago. And so, you know, I read Shot in the Dark, and I read the Vaccine Guide, and I read a bunch of other books, and it just kind of led me down that rabbit hole. So I didn't have the same impetus that you did. And by looking at your resume, I would assume this was not where you thought your life would be at this point.
This is not the plan. You know, you make plans and God laughs.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, oh, you said you want to do it. I'm going to take you on a new way to do it. So it's been a lot. And you know, you coming into this, I've never written about this, but this isn't like one community, it's like 6 or 7 communities. And it can be divided into 2 groups. Basically, it's like those whose children got hurt, yes, and those who are trying to prevent their children from getting hurt. So I'm in that, you know, first group of people. But really, it kind of, there are cohorts of people as they've come in. I've got like the founders, which I think about the crunchy people of the 70s, who were raised and raised their children in the traditional natural way, and they never vaccinated, and they never got into got sucked into the fraud in the first place. And then there was a second huge cohort that came in the 90s after the 1986 National Child Vaccine Injury Act. Like as soon as it passed, the next few birth cohorts of the late 80s is the beginning of the ramping up of the autism epidemic and a vaccine injury. But there were 3 vaccines introduced in 1991, and the mercury got jacked up in the early 90s, and the children born in the 90s are the most severe cases of the autism epidemic. So you had a smaller, kind of this first wave come in of the parents in the 90s that really kind of solidified about the same time you were coming in. So you were probably hearing from those parents. And Barbara Loe Fisher, who wrote Shot in the Dark, is one of those most vociferous parents of children who were injured back then. She helped negotiate the 86 Act. They
as much as she could do, right?
Yeah. What they were going to do with it, and then manipulated it later to everybody's consternation. So children like mine, I was kind of third wave. So you got parents of the 90s who really started investigating the mercury connection and what was happening. And over in England, they were looking at measles vaccine. In the US,
Wakefield.
Yeah. And so in the aughts, my son, my younger son who is injured, was born in 2002. And he was diagnosed in 2003, early 2004, he was formally diagnosed. And then we immediately got swept into this, and I started writing about treatments that we were trying with him and what was working and what wasn't. And I heard of a thing called a blog. Didn't know what it was. I was an early adopter of the internet. I learned to build websites in college. And in the early 80s, in the 90s, I had a little business making websites, while I was in grad school. So I just, made a buck doing it. And so I just said, well, if I've got to start keeping a journal about what's working and what isn't, I might as well put it on the internet so other parents can see, oh, we should try that. Oh, we shouldn't try that, at least have some information, because there was no research data on any of the interventions that was going on. You had to go find parents. There was no Twitter yet. There was no Facebook yet. It was just, they had Yahoo groups.
And let me ask you something. When this first happened, when you were going through this, at that point, were you already on board with saying vaccines did this to my child? Was that already there for you?
Well, here's the interesting thing. So I learned about the vaccine autism connection in college in 1988. I was at George Mason, and there was I had a child development class, and it was my second year. So it was a 200 level class, and it was, they had to go through all of the childhood developmental disorders and illnesses and whatnot. And the professor said, there's this, he spent 5 minutes on it. There's a disorder called autism. It's the Rain Man movie that came out last year. That's what it is. You'll never see a case like this, but they're fascinating. And his last sentence was, and this might have something to do with vaccines.
Interesting.
It's interesting. I said, I'll tuck that away in my head. And when I want to have kids later, I'll ask. And then 10 years later, in 1989, there was on the news that it turned out that there was too much mercury in vaccines,
right,
and they were going to take it out. But there was no harm or whatever. And I went, oh, that makes sense. Mercury kills brain cells. And he said mercury could cause autism. They'll take it out. It'll be fine. And the next year when I got pregnant, I thought, well, they took it out. I heard on the news, right? I asked the pediatrician, who was very young and a short man, and he was total Napoleon complex and very angry with me for asking the question. And I said, and my baby he was born prematurely. He was 7.5 weeks early. And so when he wanted to vaccinate him still a week before his due date. And I said, now I heard there was mercury in those. And he got very angry with me and was like, we have taken that out, as if it was, and I apologized. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm just trying to make my baby's on a heart-lung monitor. I'm trying to be careful. And I apologized to him, and then he had his nurse come in and give my premature baby a full dose mercury.
Wow.
And he fortunately is neurotypical. But we had some problems after that, and I believed him, right? So I wasn't looking at that anymore. Vaccines are safe now because they've done
Right.
the thing that it would have been, it's stupid to do in the first place. Why was it ever in there? And then we had a normal course with him. His younger brother was born. I thought I asked the question, and solved that problem. So they vaccinated. He was born a couple weeks early, but he was fine. No, went straight home from the hospital, but they vaccinated him with what I did not know at the time was still a full dose mercury vaccine. And that was in the spring of 2002. I'm sorry. So they had not even started manufacturing lower dose mercury vaccines yet. Within a few months, they started releasing them, and the subsequent vaccines that he got were all mercury free. This was at the time you could actually look that up, but they've taken that information, most of it, off the internet.
Yeah.
So he was, and he had, right after the vaccine, he had trouble. He had colic. He had upset, was crying. He couldn't settle. He was, terrible bowel problems. Everything we know now is textbook vaccine reaction.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about the bowel problems, because that's the big denial is, of course, Wakefield was a quack and he didn't,
Right.
his research, but now the research is really basically showing over and over and over again that he wasn't a quack, right?
And by the time my son was diagnosed in 2004, they had put out, CDC, HHS had put out a one pager called the Autism Alarm, that what doctors need to look for, that's co-occurring incidents with autism diagnosis. And it was gastrointestinal problems. It was a number of brain inflammation, a number of things that you could look at and say, the child's physically ill, and you're supposed to treat the physical illness. Because back then, and still, 2 decades haven't changed a lot of this. When you go to a doctor with a child with an autism diagnosis, they'll say, well, that's just autism. Yes, but he's having explosive diarrhea. Well, that's just autism. Well, the diarrhea is running down his legs and burning his skin. This is not normal. Well, that's just autism. No, it's a child with a bowel problem. You're supposed to treat it, but they don't know how, and they haven't been taught to treat it. So they have been purposefully manipulated and convinced, as we were, that there's nothing you can do and there's nothing you should try.
Right.
And mothers, and this is still the case, are talked out of their maternal instincts that something's wrong with my baby. When Chandler first had that reaction to the Hep B vaccine, the first call I made to my doctor was about his crying, that I couldn't settle him, that he was, he was so upset all the time. And he would say, that's just colic. Some babies are like that. He'll grow out of it. And then another call, because I said, well, he's getting fevers. Like, he's so hot. We called him Fire Baby, was his nickname. And his response was, well, he was born a little bit early. Some children they're born early, just have trouble regulating their body temperature. He'll grow out of it. And he said, well, is he have a runny nose? Is he coughing? Is there any other signs of infection? I said, no. But daily fevers are a problem. And I learned to deal with it behaviorally. And I made a sound of vacuum cleaner noise and looped it on my computer and laid him next to the computer speaker, so he had white noise, which, works with colic. And then, 6 months later, colic was associated with autism. And I'm like, so we were figuring out as we went. And after about my third conversation with the doctor, because I called him, God put little appointments all over the place for me. And I found a Yahoo group that was just with these autism moms who were starting to talk to each other online. And I came in and I was like, hey, having a rough day today. My son was diagnosed with autism and I don't know what to do. And some really kind woman started asking me questions, and she said, should baby have really red cheeks? Is he having diarrhea, constipation? She started asking all the right questions. And I said, who are you? Are you a witch? Why do you know these things all the time? And she's like, well, we've seen it. She was very gentle about the way she did it. And she said, we've seen all these things too. And the first thing is that you should, until you understand the vaccine issue better, hold off on any more vaccines for now. She put that really well. She said, and you can do a lot for him by what you're feeding him. She said, get a book. There's a book called Children with Starving Brains, which was by Jacqueline McCandless, who was a wonderful woman. And I read it, and I just was overwhelmed. Like, you can do this and you can do that. There are 100 things. And I had a friend. Her husband was a doctor. She's a biology professor, and she was just like, get the kids, come over to the house for the week. We will sort all this stuff with you. We'll figure it out, because that was a bit of a mess. So took the kids over, and she would watch them all while I would sit on the couch and just read this book and trying to take everything in. And she's like, okay, tell me, what are you learning? And I was like, it's too much. I can't do all this stuff. There's about 1,000 things to do, and I'm overwhelmed. And she said, pick 2 things. I was like, I can do 2 things. And she's like, let's just pick 2 things, and we're going to try it this week, and let's see what happens. And sorry, I get really emotional about this.
Oh, no, please.
20 years later, and I'm still.
And you know what? That's a perfect thing I want to say, because that's one of the primary reasons I wanted you on the show. Is too many people don't seem to connect with what it means to have an autistic child, and what kind of pressure it puts on the family, how it changes people's lives, not just the autistic child themselves and how they are going to grow up and have difficulties, but what it does to the family unit. And so, it's important. And, like you're showing the motion now, even though it's been 23 years, right? I mean, that's, yeah, absolutely.
So the 2 things I picked, she was like, you have to start with the gluten-free, casein-free diet. You got to start cleaning up the gut, and you need to start with this one intervention. And so I was like, well, I'll do that, and then fish oil. So I didn't know what I was doing at all, and we were not at home. So I just started feeding for the rest of the trip. I fed him hot dogs and potato chips because there was no gluten or casein in them, and no dairy, no bread. But he, hot dogs and potato chips, and within 48 hours, his diapers were full of things that I had never seen before. Started dumping things, and what I, figured out later was he just had a huge die-off of all sorts of yeast and bacteria and bugs and who knows what. And at the end of that 48 hours, he started making eye contact and answering to his name.
Wow.
And started playing simple little games with my girlfriend, and he had not made eye contact with her or noticed her since we got.
And how old was he at that point?
He was, he just turned 2. He regressed at 18 months. And so, it had been 6 months where I was like, I don't want to see what I'm seeing. And finally one day somebody was like, is he okay? And I said, okay, everybody else sees it too. I need to. So I went and pulled the DSM-4 off my shelf and started going through symptoms of autism, and I saw them all. And didn't mention to my son, to my husband, but he was like, something's not right, Went into my pediatrician for the 2-year appointment, and our friend, the MD that I was talking with, he said, don't mention it. Just don't say anything at all. See what happens. And he had not seen Chandler since the regression. And as soon as I went into the pediatrician, he started asking me the screening questions. And I was like, oh, he sees it too. And I answered the screening questions as objectively as I could, giving symptoms. I didn't say yes or no. I said, well, I see this and this happens. And he was very quickly into the appointment. He said, well, we need to get him evaluated. And I'm calling my friend, and he got me in that week to to get a formal evaluation. And so we got into things very quickly, and I came across that book very quickly, and other moms who were biomed moms who were already, way further down the road than I was, the 90s moms that I was talking about.
Yes. Yeah.
And, within 48 hours, we saw a change in him. So I was like, went back to the mainstream pediatrician, who was not an aggressive vaccinator. He was not. Chandler never got the MMR because he'd missed an appointment, and our doctor didn't care about catching them up. He just, and I went back to him and I said, look, here's what happened. We tried the diet. And he was like, well, I've heard the diet doesn't really work and whatever. And I said, I was like, yeah, but it's working for him. He's one of these kids that can make improvements. And he kind of, the third time I said something, I was like, no, listen to me. He is one of the okay one. This works for him. Of course, not going to work for everybody, but this works for him. And I was expecting him to say, oh, well, if he's showing a response there, then here's what we need to try next. Or here's what, but by the third time he brushed me off, I was like, I realized, cognitively, he cannot go on this journey with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it means he caused the problem. I didn't know that then, but I knew that
and the simple fact that he had no training in nutrition, I'm sure.
Exactly.
Exactly.
He didn't know anything. I mean, he was a nice guy, but he was really, he'd been lied to still.
I tell patients all the time that, just because your medical doctor, it's not a matter of judging your medical doctor based on their good guy or bad guy, nice guy, bad woman, whatever. Their educational training is doing two things. Number one, it's reinforcing this belief in drugs and vaccines, and that's what creates health. And it's also, they have no foundational understanding of what really creates health, from cellular health to nutrition to anything that's really wellness. It's all about pharmaceuticals. And so, they're pharmacists with a doctorate, with a medical doctorate degree is basically what they are. And I don't mean that as an insult. It is just kind of a factual situation for medicine as it is. And so to expect them to support you and help you and assist you in a path that's beyond their paradigm is not realistic. And that's why alternative doctors, I can't prescribe medications, okay, but chiropractors or naturopaths or anyone with a more alternative bend to them is really going to have that information, nutritionists, et cetera. So, yeah.
I mean, it's the to the man with a hammer, everything. And they've only been given a hammer, and they haven't even told, child who stops making eye contact and won't answer to his name and doesn't recognize familiar people or places is the textbook definition on the HHS website of a vaccine-induced brain encephalopathy. Here's how to evaluate these kids. First of all, get them to an emergency room. Second of all, look for brain swelling. So, they're not even taught the basics. So these poor babies, including mine, have poor giant swollen brains. They're in pain, and they are never even given a proper medical evaluation. And it's evil and it's criminal, and they don't know. And they have been so, in the last couple of decades, they've been so, everybody, they Wakefielded, and now they do it to everybody else who sticks their head up. And the blessing of the COVID era is that they're exposed, right?
Yes.
So, which I think is like the 6th or 7th cohort to come in, right? We've got the early 2000s parents like me who were part of battling out of it. And then in the teens, you have the healthy parents, the parents with healthy kids, and they still have money and they're still functional people, and they're not, we're all fried and, falling apart and broke and have a kid on one hand and trying to fight off pharmaceutical company with another. In the 2015 really is when the pharmaceutical companies rolled out 100 bills in 35 states to remove religious exemption. They knew their paradigm is falling apart, so they've got to force it. And it didn't work that year, but they have, spent 5 more years trying to get rid of it, get rid of the religious exemption. That was
the year that we had measles in Disneyland. And that was what set off, I was having a conversation with someone recently, and I was saying, they were talking about the media and the bias in the media, et cetera. And I said, I've known this way before COVID, because all you had to do was know the truth behind vaccines early on to see the lies that the media was perpetrating even then. And so it just became more obvious and worse during COVID. But even with the measles situation at Disneyland, and that's, you're right, that's when we had Pan in California and all of that, and that kind of cascaded across the country. And of course, the biggest problem is that it got rid of the philosophical exemption. And I tell me, because I'm my understanding is there is no more philosophical exemption in any state, or is there still one or two that have it?
No, I became the head of the main coalition for vaccine choice. Well, I founded it because there was, nothing, there was no infrastructure. Around 2010, parents really started organizing politically in the states. And I founded the main coalition for vaccine choice.
Yeah.
And we had a philosophical exemption. They got rid of it I left Maine in 2019. And shortly after they got rid of it, I'm sorry, I left in 22, but I left the organization in 19, and they seized on that and poured they have all the money. Like, it's not like, well, parents have a lot of money, but they've got a little more. They can just call the Federal Reserve and say, put a zero on the end of my account. They don't even deal in the realities that we do, because there's so much corruption. So they got rid of it in Maine in 2019. I don't know any state that has it.
Yeah, I don't either.
So the thing is, they've lost ground. We had 5 states that didn't have a personal choice, either religious or exemption. Now there's only 4: California, Maine, New York, and Connecticut. And Connecticut is new. They took that away in the last few years. And so now that Bobby and Maha have ascended, there's an organized effort to get Trump to write an executive order giving, that would force every state to give one back.
The religious exemption.
Under the federal First Amendment rights. So
right.
We'll see what happens there. But yeah, it's been just the history of walking through this has been to have witnessed all of it for the last 21 years, I guess I've been doing this, is to really witness the self-destruction of the vaccine program and the medical system. Like, the vaccines are such a sacred cow, and there's so many people tied into, the murder and decimation of child health, that, it's like they were, it's a cult that they were, tricked into joining, and then it's revealed, and too many people won't come out of it. Their career depends on it. Their ego depends on it, because it is very hard. Doctors are humans.
Yeah.
And doctors don't go, and nobody goes into medical school going, I'm here to help children for money.
Right.
And to find out, I mean, just as a therapist, my professional opinion is people are great at denial, and there's no more ugly thought to a doctor than I hurt my patients.
Right.
That I believed a lie about this. So
and I think that's the same. I think that's the same psychology for parents who have vaccinated their children, even if they didn't have a problem, to go backwards in their mentality and say, I chose to do something that was harmful to my child. No. It's like you said, it's that mental block of, I can't accept that I would have done something that they can't put it together, that they were ignorant. They just didn't know. Mm-hmm. And the reason they didn't know is because they were lied to, and then move past that. It's almost a matter of, if I say that you're right, then it tells me that I'm a bad parent. Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I'm fortunate in that God didn't let me grip on that denial. I'm from a religious tradition that sees the human race as broken and fallen and selfish, and and permeated with sin, who is loved anyway, and in spite of how badly we behave. So coming to terms with the fact that I poisoned my child, really painful. And I kind of don't point fingers, certainly at parents, but even at doctors who don't want to deal with the fact that they have been the monster. Because I had to face that. I remember I was at a conference very early on when they passed around the diagnostic criteria for vaccine-induced brain damage, and my child's symptoms were on there, and this is exactly what it done. And I had done it to him, and I sobbed for 2 hours sitting in the back of this ballroom, long after it was over. People, the room was empty, and I couldn't leave because I was such a mess. Coming to terms with that reality is really hard, because I was going to be such a good mom. I was going to grad school halfway to take care of other people, but I was going to have such healthy kids, and we were going to have such great communication. And I have something with communication disorder, and I did it to him. And it's painful, and I get it, but we cannot, if we want to end this terribleness, we can't spend the rest of our lives believing that we are perfect and we are good people. We're not good people. I mean, everybody in their darkest day, we know the things that we're most ashamed of in life. And everybody needs to live a life of repentance and course correction and learning and be able to admit their mistakes. And that the idea that pride cometh before a fall is at the heart of this entire epidemic of the new childhood epidemics of neurological and autoimmune disorders, because people cannot change course, and because doctors are like, I'm a doctor, how dare you question me? Like, right. And I'm a mother, how dare you lie to me? Like, we have to get off our high horses. And the result of my kind of emotional journey of hearing it first, right? I heard it in 88, and it made sense to me then, and I believed the lie in the 2000s. Like, why didn't I? So there's an extra layer there of like, I knew I should have.
Gotcha.
I should have read for myself and not trusted what a doctor said to me, who turned out to be, again, a very prideful person who still has not learned, right? So, and kind of the wonderful things about the doctors who have followed the natural path and don't prescribe is that they have not as easily fallen into the trap of nothing can be questioned, right? Because they start out their career questioning.
Yes.
So
yeah.
I don't know. I could talk for a long time of the emotional dynamics of all of this and how this is still here. But the journey of this movement, and especially starting in 2020, the monster, the pharmaceutical industrial complex, the whatever you want to call the beast, they decided they keep every episode, they'll have a setback. They have something gets exposed. There's research that comes out that's like telling the medical establishment, stop. You have to stop here. You have to stop now, reevaluate to fix the problem. Is for them to go, nope, and shove their hit.
It's the constant denial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And put more coal in the engine, make the train go faster.
Right.
So they have not been able to stop doubling down. Yeah. And when clearly halfway, by 2023, they couldn't say, you know what, there's a problem here. And there's some people still out there saying they still won't pull the recommendation for the COVID shot. Like, it is.
Well, let's hold off on COVID just for a second, because I want to get into that. But one question I'd like to hear from you or answer that goes back to what you were saying with your beginning is, was there, because there may not have been an exact moment, but I'll ask it in that sense and then you can explain it. Mm-hmm. Was there a moment when you decided that I'm going to be a warrior mom, that I'm going to take this battle to the monster and try to do something? Because that is what you've been doing for a long time now. And was it a slow build, or was there a moment when you said enough's enough and I'm going to be this warrior mom get that label, earn it?
No, it's the same thing. You do the one thing. When Chandler was diagnosed mentally, I went, 2 years. I'm going to have him back in 2 years, and we're going to get back to normal. I'm going to go back and be a therapist, and and that I should have said goodbye in my heart to that career 20 years ago. Because I was like, okay, we're going to do this therapy. I started a blog because I'd heard of one person. Michael Myers had a blog. I was like, okay, go to Blogger, put up a thing, and I'm doing a 30-day therapy, and I'll put each of the 30 days up there, and then report on how he's done. And then something happened, and I was like, well, I should write about this. And then a study came out, and I'm like, I should write about this. And then, I had to face the vaccine stuff, because when he was first diagnosed, I was like, I hear the vaccine stuff. I can't process that right now. Let me start helping him, and I'll go back and look at the dates, the videos, the whatever. Because in my head, he was vaccinated right around his brother's birthday, and then which was a month before Halloween, and right around Halloween, I was having huge problems with him. When did all that start? I'm going to go look at pictures, videos, the dates on them, whatever, but I can't do that right now. So after a couple months of working on his health, I went back and looked at all the records and cried for about a month, because it fit exactly. I had taken him in the day before the birthday party, and then the birthday party videos are him walking around like a zombie. And my grandfather died, and then there was I remember he was so easy at the funeral. He was so easy the whole time we were on the trip to take care of. Oh, he was just completely tuned out. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't engage us at all. But at the time, it didn't scare me. I was just really grateful that I was going through all this other emotional stuff, and that he was just so happy and peaceful and didn't need anything. And then a couple of weeks before the holiday, and I realized he was in the guilt of realizing that he was in a regression. He was losing skills. He had brain inflammation. He had mercury poisoning, which we found later. Like that was a process of 6 months before I could say, okay, yes, he's one of the kids that got hurt. And that was before I had read most of the things I had. I had enough evidence that this was what had happened. And so then I had to write about him beforehand and after, like, what was the definition? And then, things start happening. It was at a time, and here's the big difference, in 2004, it was a big deal if the word autism was mentioned in a newspaper article or a local story. And so we hung on kind of everything that came out. Then the first time, it was months or a year in probably, that the word vaccine appeared in the same article as the word autism. That was unheard of.
Completely.
But we started seeing a little bit of that. Now, of course, it's daily, multiple times a day. So I started having to write, like, this doesn't make sense. Hey, I just read a package insert. This is on here. And you start having to report on things. And then you run into other parents who are working on trying to get medical help for our kids. And then, I made the bold mistake of getting on an airplane and flying to DC to go to a march to get the government to start treating our kids. And you meet all the parents that you've been talking to online and get a bigger grasp on how bad the problem is and how awful it is for so many kids, especially the really severe ones who have no speech. Right. And, and I still have close friends that have grown up with, their sons are 6 feet tall now and 30 and are in diapers and don't speak and have daily seizures. And the horrible injustice of it all, it seeps in. It's not just your son, and they've done worse to other kids.
And that's the epidemic that we're dealing with as a country. The new statistics that Kennedy announced to everybody. I was aware of it myself already. I'm sure you are, but for a lot of people, they saw those numbers and came as probably a shock. I don't know why, particularly, but yeah,
it really did. I wrote a piece on how angry the country was that Bobby Kennedy talked about profound autism. So nobody wants to believe it exists. Everybody wants to believe, the quirky kids down the street.
Right.
But they don't want to talk about the kids that they never see because they can't leave the house. And
Well, and of course they were trying to make it out like he was trying to insult parents with autism, which is what that side does. They try to flip the words around on people to make it fit their narrative. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and anything they can do to knock Kennedy down, they're going to try. So,
And they actually started that when Chandler was pretty young, and it was pretty when I started writing. I was the first autism blog to talk about vaccine stuff. And again, this is like 2004. And, then some group blogs and bigger blogs came along, and I found like, okay, I'm not the only one out there talking about this. There were kind of the people who put out the books and done the big things, and there was the Yahoo groups, but there was nobody in the middle, kind of, and that's where I kind of found my space, and it still is, because I want to be accessible to the moms. I want any parent who needs any help to be able to get a hold of me. I've kind of functioned now like a switchboard operator, and parents will be like, "This is what we're involved in, and this is our problem, and here's where we can help." I'm like, "Oh, you need to talk to such and such and such." So I've kind of stayed in that middle space so that I'm not out of touch with what's going on, and I don't have the big burden of what people who are getting on
sure.
TV and going to work for the.
With that said, tell me right now, give me the list of the sites that you run, and just go ahead and say it. I'm gonna put up a something at the end that'll list everything, but just go ahead and verbalize it. And in fact, I'll start you off because this is my favorite one. My favorite one is How Do Vaccines Cause Autism?
Right.
That is a site that I have personally gone back to hundreds of times over the years. And I will tell you this too, my favorite part of that site, and I'm getting a little giggly thinking about it because I think it's so awesome, is the facts page. Because if you go to that facts page, you're expecting facts, facts here, this, but you address it in such a wonderfully humorous way, because it starts off, and I don't remember the exact way it starts off, but it starts off basically like someone saying, like, who runs this website? And the answer is, it doesn't matter. The information here is factual and it's just research. And so it doesn't matter who runs that. That makes no difference whatsoever. But what if I don't, how can I trust you? You shouldn't trust us. You should do your own fact checking. It's classic. I love it. I think it's hilarious.
Well, first of all, one thing that this life will make you is either you get funnier or you check yourself into a mental hospital, because you're dealing with insane things all the time, and to not be like, here's the obvious truth. Can we just, I don't, and one of the worst of it is the appeals to authority. But CDC says, and I'm like, they should all be in jail. Why do I care what they say, right? But the AAP says, and I'm like, the AAP has shepherded the American child health into the garbage. Like, if every car that comes out of your factory, if 60% of them won't drive anymore, you're a bad car maker, and nobody should, and you shouldn't be given any government contracts at all. Right. So they want to know who's endorsed or whatever. I was like, it doesn't matter. Use your brain, read it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is the way that website came about. And again, 18-year revolution. You don't step up to be a mother warrior. You just get pissed off one day, like something, and you start going, and you just end up keep going. There was, when they started, the Wakefield paper came out in 98.
Right.
By 2004, there was enough consternation on both sides of the pond that they started to having to answer questions that they couldn't answer, so they scapegoated Wakefield.
Well, it was 2005 when they retracted it, right?
Well, it started in 2004. They started attacking him. They attacked it louder in 2005. They didn't convict him or finish the trial or whatever until 2010. So they spent more than 5 years beating him to a pulp at every turn. Now, I have a thing on my Substack that I got to give a lecture to South Carolina University, saying, look, if you want to blame Andy for all of this, for the whole myth that vaccines cause autism, go ahead. You believe every horrible bad thing about him you want to, and they tell you to. But the fact is that vaccines, the research showing vaccines cause autism, started in 1943, before he was born. The Congress said, we are concerned that pertussis containing a vaccine is causing autism, and ordered NIH to do a study on it in 1986. I don't even know if he was a doctor by then. I think he was still in college. So this has nothing to do with Andy. If you erase the whole Andy Wakefield chapter, it would change the story not at all.
They just needed a scapegoat. It was a kangaroo court. They needed a scapegoat. Yeah.
And they don't, and they still drag his poor beat.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
And beat him some more.
One of these days, and this is truly my hope. One of these days, they're going to, honor him in some way, because his initial work was all about trying to find an answer to this mystery, and the people who want to talk about it, he was convicted, he lost his license, all this stuff. All you have to do is go back even to the initial information, and it's on video, where they ask him, and I'm paraphrasing it, of course, does your research, prove that? And he tells the audience right then on the camera that the research was never intended to say that this does this, and that it doesn't. It's causal, and he answers that question very clearly in that video.
And the paper did too. I mean,
paper.
The quote in the paper was that this paper is not intended to build a connection between vaccines and autism. And in fact, you would have to do an entirely different kind of research paper to prove that. So he said, we found no link between, because they weren't looking for one. But that's still, they needed a scapegoat. And the handsome British doctor who was like, he's like a 6th generation blue blood doctor. I mean, he's not like, they painted him as,
some rebel.
Like selling, snake oil in the alleys of London or something. It's ridiculous. And he is getting that. Like, I love that he's back out in the media, and being embraced by the people who figured out during the pandemic that they have been like, oh, maybe that Andy Wakefield. And he's doing great. I mean, he left Britain back in the day in the aughts, early 10s. And he then came over here, and they tried to do, ruin his everything. He's an American citizen now. Like they lied, and they're like, he's been deported from the U.S. He's an American. I mean, they can't stop lying about him, and everybody just thinks it's funny now. And he's getting new respect, and so I hope that what you're saying happens in his lifetime, and he will get the real apology. Because I've been saying for 15 years, I'm really proud of him that he's not in a bell tower with a shotgun. I mean, the way he was treated has been a nightmare, and he survived it. So
well, and he's got so much validation right now, because there's the research that's stacked up in his favor over the past 15, 20 years is immense. And new stuff comes out all the time, showing more connections between gastroenteritis and autism. And so this was his foundational work back then, and it's just being reproduced over and over again. So,
and the dumb things, that's like I said, in 2004, when they started attacking him, the CDC was putting out statements saying, hey, got a autism case, make sure you look at the GI tract.
Yeah.
And I was like, how are they attacking Andy and promoting his work at the same time?
Right.
So
it's the languaging that people like to use, and I'll give you 2 examples. One, on the topic that we're talking about right now, you can pretty much ask anybody, does the gut's microbiome affect your mental state? And everyone will say across the board, absolutely 100%. The research proves that, it shows that. But then if you start to talk about a link between that and autism, immediately it's shut down. You can't make an easy crossover from those 2 statements. And the same thing could be made from, the insert shows that encephalopathy and encephalitis are both responses from vaccines. But then to make that crossover to autism, there's this steel wall between the 2 of those concepts, when anybody with even a little bit of brain power should be able to see that you should be able to cross that pretty easily and say that if this product can create pathology in the brain and swelling and inflammation, could that possibly create something
And
like
the exact same symptoms and the
Yes.
hallmark symptoms
Yes.
of loss of eye contact.
Yes.
And they've done that very skillfully and on purpose. Autism is a diagnosis. It's an imaginary diagnosis. There's nothing that grounds it to reality. It's a description of behaviors. So I've got two sons. If I wanted to present my neurotypical son as my son with autism, he knows how to fake it. He knows how to act like his brother. And no team of doctors, as long as he could keep up the ruse. And I said this started before he was 3 years old. They couldn't tell that he didn't have autism because they have purposely kept it from having any real world physical symptom that could be tested, measured. They can't say, well, if he's got a, autoimmune description of this that responds to this lab test and it's over this marker, then it's included in the autism diagnosis. Or to have an autism diagnosis, you have behavioral disorder, it's a communication disorder, you have problems communicating, you have stereotype behaviors, and you have it's a lengthy, okay, if they're doing this, but any good con man can do that because there is no physical symptoms, but they have now married it and calling it, just co-occurring conditions to brain inflammation. To Johns Hopkins said that one of the main physical symptoms of autism is brain inflammation, but it's not in the diagnosis. So you can never prove, yes, a piano fell on his head, but you can't prove that he can't walk anymore and talk anymore because the piano fell on his head, because we don't know how that happened in his brain. Like, that's the thing. They're not going to ever let it happen. They had the Interagency Autism Coordinating Committee before 2010, between 2006 and 2010. The director, who was just another fraudster, was saying to us in meetings and after meetings, well, what you really need is you really need some biomarkers that can, make it medically diagnosable. And we were like, that's a great
You think?
about inflammatory markers. How about autoimmune this? How about, but he would never let that happen. So, it was like he's taunting us with that stuff.
Yeah.
We know autism is medical, but they will not give it a medical definition.
So let's go down that.
In the law now, autism is medical, but Trump just, in his first presidency, he just by fiat signed a bill that said autism is a medical disorder, but they still never gave it any diagnosable medical standards to find it with. So
Right. Well, let's go down that road for a minute here. This is some of this, a lot of this, especially for those who don't believe in this and what we're talking about, would say that there's no basis for this discussion that we're about to have here. And that would be what you feel are the associated situations that lead to autism. So there's MTHFR. That's one thing that people always talk about. There is gut health prior to that with the mom, even that the mom's gut health, and that there are other genetic factors that may lead to this. We know that boys and African-American boys have higher risks and ratios. Do you, at this point, with everything that you've seen, everything you've looked at, do you feel like you have at least a theory of what it is that predisposes this child to autism with a vaccine as the in causative agent, and this person doesn't get it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, however, it's complicated and there's more than one pathway. So in the research, I never finished my first story. So how do vaccines cause autism? The way it started was they were beating on Andy. Started in 2004. In 2007, something else had come out in their favor, and they were going back. And in the media, I didn't understand the idea of the mockingbird media until in 2007. We had a week again when autism articles were still rare. That they had 10 different articles from all these different outlets using the phrase "no evidence of any link." There's no evidence of any link between vaccines and autism.
They love
like
that.
The 7th or 8th time I heard that phrase, I'm like, oh, Mockingbird Media, this was a talking point. This is why they do this. None of these articles are investigated. This is just what they're told to produce. It pissed me off. So I'm like, I'm going to write an article about it. And David Kirby, who's the New York Times bestseller, who wrote the book Evidence of Harm, and who with whom Bobby Kennedy wrote the Rolling Stone article that he and David wrote it together that kind of summarized the book in 2005. Now his coming out party on these things. The book Evidence of Harm went over some of the research that did find links between mercury and autism, both environmental mercury and vaccine mercury. And at the, in the index in the back of the book, I think he had like 15 or 20 or like 18 papers that showed evidence of a link between mercury and autism. So I just took those couple dozen papers and I put them on an article on my little blog and was like, this question is settled. I don't want to hear it again. Here are links. Of course, it wasn't settled. They don't care. I'm nobody. The CDC, I guess, wasn't reading my mommy blog. And
too bad.
I know. I'm of the firm belief that everybody should know what I think. So there was, it kind of caught fire, and then it kind of stayed popular. And every time I would find a new paper, because we're looking at all the papers, because we've got to figure out how to cure our babies, right? We need to know what's going on in their bodies. So papers on mitochondria would come out, and vaccines cause mitochondrial damage, and we find mitochondrial damage in autism. So I'd be like, hey, here's a link. It's mitochondria. And then a link between GI, and then as papers come out, I think it'd be like 60 or 80 papers. And I was like, well, this is, I think, something worthy of people seeing. But on a little mommy blog, this isn't the right place for it. So I moved it to Scribd, and then it became more popular. And then people started sending me papers. Hey, Ginger, new paper's out. Does this belong on your list? And I go through that. And it's funny because I went to grad school to become a therapist and help babies and help teenagers connect with their parents. And I'm like, I don't want to write a paper. I don't want to read a paper. I don't want to do any research. And my training in grad school was just, here's how to read and evaluate a paper, right? It wasn't doing it. I learned how to find standard deviation and set a p-value, but I never wanted to live in that world at all. So I had I had to figure out that I actually liked reading these papers to prove our point and to put it out there to help our kids and say, hey, mito cocktails of vitamins and B vitamins work for our children. Isn't this amazing? And as things went and I moved it there, more and more papers would come in. I think it was at about by 2020, it was it's like 160 papers at that point. And I still had piles of stuff to go through whenever I had free time and it was inspired. And when COVID started, I just was like, well, look, we're going in the ark. We're closing up the door. We're going to take care of our family. We're going to take care of our neighbors. We've warned you all we can. We've said everything like, do not trust these people, which kind of was funny because their article came out a year ago. It was like, did the anti-vaxxers do enough to warn us? And we're like, you gotta be kidding me. Like,
I didn't read that article. That's hilarious.
But yeah, it's really tough. I think it was the
blame the anti-vaxxers for this too. Yes.
Yeah, we didn't warn you. So so we were just kind of like, well, we got to protect the family and figure out. We ended up leaving Maine and moving to South Carolina just to get out of the toxic environment and take care of our family. My parents are down here. So once at the end of probably the end of 2022, the doctors like McCullough and all these and Malone and these high profile doctors had come out and said, we're injured, our friends are injured, we're seeing people die. Maybe this is bad. This was the end of 21. And by the end of 22, they all were starting to circulate with our community. And suddenly they were saying, maybe the autism vaccine people aren't crazy.
Yeah.
Maybe they have a point. And I went, damn it, I should have been ready for this. And I went back and I hadn't touched any of the work. I went back and looked at it, and it had 1 million views in the previous year.
Wow.
Of the vaccine autism links. There's 160 papers, and I still had another, I still haven't caught up. So I very quickly got somebody to sponsor me just to build it all into a website to kind of make sense of it, because it was just a very long list of papers that didn't have any context, except that I pulled out quotes from each of the papers. So it was for scientists or parents to read. Nobody else really read it. People would pull it up and say, oh, this research does exist.
Yeah.
Because still the CDC and the AAP, their line is vaccines do not cause autism. There is no research associating vaccines and autism. So I'm like, look, here is 100 papers. And they're like, well, those are all wrong. Nobody will look at it. They don't know what's on the list, but
Yeah.
so it's out there, and the doctors started reading it. So I put up the site so that it could be searchable, and I could put all the mitochondrial papers together, all mercury papers together.
And is that the How Do Vaccines Cause Autism site?
Yes. That is
Yeah.
how the vaccines cause autism. And you can actually go down a rabbit hole. If you have a newly diagnosed child and you're like, they came back and he's got these weird mitochondrial testing. He's got they can go down the aluminum rabbit hole, and they can go down inflammatory cytokines and brain inflammation, and look at all of it specifically and find the links and build the case for what's going on with their kids specifically. In that body of research, to jump back to the question you were just asking, there are 5 different pathways between vaccines and autism: mercury, aluminum, the live measles virus vaccine, which the reason we vaccinate for it is because it kills people. It causes SSPE, which is brain encephalopathy, which can kill and can create disability for life. But so can the vaccines.
Right.
Virus, do you catch wild measles, or do you get the live measles through the vaccine? Both can do the same thing. Pertussis toxoid containing vaccine. And then also there's links to vaccines containing aborted fetal cell remains.
Sure.
Links
Yes.
there. There's also the number of vaccines given, which is like 6th category. And now we have one paper that's linking the mitochondrial DNA vaccines. The COVID-19 mRNA vaccines to animal model autism. So that is starting to look like there could be a second pathway. But kids don't get diagnosed with autism until they're 3.
Right.
Or 4. I think the average age is like 4.2. But you wouldn't even really see it yet in the population that got it during pregnancy or early childhood. So there may be a 7th pathway. So it's not just one way. It's not just vaccines. It's other chemical exposures as well.
Yeah, and that's what makes this so complicated. There was a thread on Twitter that I was involved in, which is always talk about rabbit holes. But the argument was, thimerosal has been removed, and this came about because of the most recent ACIP information. Thimerosal has been removed for all this time, and now autism's still going up. So how do you explain that? And that's because they're simplifying this into this bullet point that it's not, and it can't be. So to say that they're trying, and the real reason is what they're trying to do is take the argument of vaccines cause autism and say you've been proven wrong because you said all along that it was mercury, and now mercury's been out of the vaccines and it's still going up. They're forgetting the fact that, number one, it wasn't out totally, number one. And number two, I think I don't know if it was a mistake on our part early on, which that may be part of it, or if it was intentionally glammed onto by the pro-vax side to enforce this. And that is that the focus is only on mercury. It's only on mercury. There was a great poster that came out. I don't remember when I saw it, but it basically had the name of all of the vaccines stringed together as one long word. And it basically said there's never been a research study done on this vaccine, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we can actually talk about that and jump back to the MTHFR pathway you were talking about. We have kind of the earliest understanding of that pathway is that there are a subset of children, and this is still the agreed on by every serious person in the debate, that autism has genetic and environmental links. This is an
Yes.
epigenetic epidemic. And the MTHFR pathway specifically, I was going to try to find it, but I'm not going to waste my eyeball time. That the children born that are born with MTHFR mutations, and that's methylene tetrahydrase reductase.
You're doing a better job than I would have pronouncing that. Yes.
Have a the C677T polymorphism specifically,
Right.
and they could have one or two. And those who have two are the most at risk, because what that does, it is not a premeditation to autism. There is no premeditated gene equals autism. It is a genetic difference that impairs the methylation process in the body. And methylation, the simplest way, it's incredibly complicated, and I think there are 3 people in the world who actually understand it. But the simplest way to discuss it is that, we have in every cell a little engine that it starts with some basic inputs like zinc and copper, and they have about 40 different gates they have to go through to change this into that and bind and split up. And at the exit, what the product of this cycle does is it creates an amino acid called glutathione,
Right.
which is the body's garbage man. And
Helps the cells to detox.
Yes, it binds to mercury and other toxicants. And so the liver can then process that out of the body.
Right.
So I have 2 sons. And one got more mercury and didn't develop autism, and one got less mercury and became a child with autism. And what that tells me is they have a genetic difference, that one child was able to get rid of it. One child was producing enough glutathione to get rid of it, and child number 2, who got less mercury than his brother, couldn't eliminate it.
Right.
And that has been backed up by NIH did a primate study.
I've seen that one. Yes.
Burbacher study, and they compared. There's this argument that no, the mercury in vaccines was the good kind of mercury.
Yes.
There's a great chemist at a university. I can't remember which university, but he said, the difference between these 2 types of mercury is the difference between 6 bullets to the head and 2 bullets to the head.
And that was the ethyl versus methyl argument.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so looking at the Burbacher study that is comparing ethyl and methyl, what was always assumed was that vaccine mercury, because it was a smaller molecule, the body could
get rid of it.
Could get rid of it, and it was easy to leave the brain if it got in there. And what they found in these primates was that once it breached the blood-brain barrier and got into the brain, it combined with oxygen molecules into a huge molecule that could not escape, and that vaccine mercury does not wash out of the brain and had a 20-year half-life. And again, we didn't know that when my son was vaccinated, but we knew it very shortly after. And going back to the medical establishment, say, well, this makes sense. This is what we're talking about. That's why we're finding mercury in our kids when we chelate them, when we give something that will bind to the mercury so that the liver can process it out. We're finding it in their urine, where we were not unable to find it in their urine before, but it was in there. That's one pathway, and we know that mercury kills brain cells, and we know it causes brain damage, period. The reason it is used in vaccines is it because it kills every live thing it comes into contact with, to keep bacteria from growing in the bile. So that's one pathway.
We have a similar pathway with aluminum.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's funny because we had to chelate our son for mercury, And it's a very complicated process, and
It is.
you've got to be careful. And there's different chelators that you use for adults and kids. And but the thing that chelates aluminum the best is Fiji water that you can buy at Walmart, because the silica content of it.
Huh.
It's the thing that binds to aluminum to get rid of it in the body. So it's kind of crazy. The whole thing is crazy.
Did your since you brought that up, did the chelation show a noticeable difference with your son?
Yeah, it was great for him.
Yeah.
We did the first 2 weeks of it. We ended up moving across the country and across the street to the doctor and his wife that I was talking earlier. And we raised our kids together. We had boys the same age. They went out of town on vacation. And so for 2 weeks, we had started his chelation. And then they came home and all the boys were playing in the driveway there. And he was stopping. She's like, what did you do? What did you do while he was gone? Because he was playing with the other boys for the first time. And I kind of just smiled, and it was great that she started freaking out and seeing it, but I didn't have to tell her. And then we had, people, teachers and workers at school, his speech therapist, we wouldn't tell them when we would do anything, and we would wait for their response to tell us. And so we saw some beautiful things. Hyperbaric treatment, wonderful for him.
What would be your top 5 things that you would say to someone with a child with autism that you have found have worked really well?
For him. So I'm very
specify for your son.
Yes,
sure. Yes.
Because different things, different kids, because they've all been poisoned and harmed
100%.
in ways. Yeah. For him, the dietary changes are vital. You've got to get the gut healed before you can do anything else. So, that first experience of just even the first 2 days of badly implementing a gluten-free, casein-free diet.
Hot dogs and potato chips.
Hot dogs and potato chips. I came home from the weekend, and my husband saw him, and he's like, wow, this is amazing. And I was like, yeah, I just took the weekend out. And he's like, well, I made pizza for dinner. I was like, that's okay. We'll feed him pizza, and then we'll figure out how to do this next week. And the two of us sat down, and he was in between us, and I was explaining everything to him. We were talking about 15 minutes, and he's eating the pizza and loving the pizza. And we look back at him, and he has turned into, like, he's Stevie Wonder. His head was just, he was high as a kite. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, that's how fast the change can go back on. I was like, well, that's like a retest success. So I was like, we'll eat pizza this weekend, but let's figure out how to do this properly. And that was another 5-year journey to figure out.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
We had another big success with specific carbohydrate diet, and then going organic, and then
very good.
Getting GMOs out. And we kind of got to the place where we decided, you know what, if it didn't exist 300 years ago, it shouldn't go in his body. He's the canary in the coal mine that is going to tell you, don't do that. As we were changing his diet, we had days where we were like, what is wrong with him? And we found out that he stole his brother's peanut butter sandwich. So we learned to lock our cabinets, and we had, this is the sacred cabinet, he cannot go in. And and that happened to us. He's 23 now.
Yeah.
And he was having a horrible weekend. And his older brother, who's now, 25, came out, and he's like, Mom, I screwed up. I looked around. He's like, Chandler's been so upset all weekend, and I figured out that I fed him a gluten pizza. Like, and Chandler's great about it. Like, he'll be like, oh, what's in this? Like, he knows that he can't, and he's like, I fed it to him. I literally made it for him and handed it to him, and I didn't check the box, and I thought this was a gluten-free brand. So that rarely happens, but it is still there, and he's a super happy guy. Now, but it's taken a lot of years. But changing his diet, getting GMOs out, I think is, we thought he was doing great because it was organic. But what we did, this was 2007, we didn't realize at the time until The World According to Monsanto came out, that and my question was, and I wrote one of the doctors in the film, is my son better organic because he's not getting glyphosate anymore? And was he getting it before he regressed? And did that bring up the inflammation floor? So then he was vaccinated, how much did that contribute? And he's like, yeah, this is a good theory. I think that could be part of it. So, finding the triggers and pulling them out has taken years. And we still screw up sometimes. So the diet has been the most important thing, the chelating the mercury, and a ton of lead came out. We didn't know he was having lead exposures, and we found those as well. Hyperbaric was huge for him. And I've had it as well. And
How often were you using that?
He was in late elementary school, maybe fourth grade. And we met someone who was a retired doctor. He had retired from Philadelphia and bought an organic farm out in the middle of nowhere, Maine. But he brought his heart tank with him. And he just one day was like, well, come on up and, so we called our doctor and said, hey, will you write a script for heart tank hyperbaric? We're going to try this. And he was like, sure. And so we went up and did one, and it went so well that we did 2 straight weeks of every day. We had to drive it in like an hour and a half every day and back. So it was huge, time commitment. And what his speech therapist at school, I was in a PTA meeting for the special needs parents. And as soon as it ended, they said, thank you for your time. And everybody starts to stand up. And she's at the other end of the room. And she's like, Ginger, oh my God. I was like, I laughed. I knew what she was talking about. And everybody stopped and was like, frozen. And I just said, you have my permission to tell them. And she just starts raving. She's like, what have you done? You're so changed. I can't believe he's doing this now. He's doing that now. And somebody thought there was a rumor at his school that I had taken him to Switzerland for some sort of special imaginary treatment because I had to, the show much travel. And I said, no, hyperbaric is just his getting oxygen to his brain and he's healing his brain. And so that was kind of it was exciting for everybody else to learn that he was doing so well. So that was a big thing for us. B12. We did injections for a while, and then once he had kind of gotten over the part of the healing of the gut, so he could start absorbing B12, we started giving it to him orally. What else? I don't know. I tend not to push the interventions because I'm so worried that people will be like, oh, well, Ginger did it, so we'll do it too. But all these kids are different, and he was mercury injured. He was injured by the mercury in his initial hepatitis B vaccine, and then at 18 months, his pertussis vaccine. So which did not have mercury in it. And he had some lead exposure. So I hate when everybody puts autism in one basket because you've got, he never got the measles vaccine. You have kids that have been fighting, persistent long-term measles infections that they can't get rid of. And so I don't want to say, don't do antivirals or, because all these kids are different. What they all seem to have in common is brain inflammation and gut disturbances.
Right.
So those are just our success stories.
One of the people I want to get onto the show is James. I'm sure you're friends with James, Dr. Jack.
Yes.
James Lyons-Weiler. Yeah, if I can ever get the publisher to move ahead, James has already agreed to write the foreword for my book, and so I want to get him on here and have him talk about his book, which is a great book to talk about the different causes, the different vectors for autism. Mm-hmm. It's a very complex, conversation, and it's only those people who are the diehard vaxxers that want to turn it into something simplistic so that they can argue it. It makes it easy for them to argue against vaccines if they can simplify the whole thing down to a bullet point like mercury or something.
And it's complicated. And a matter of fact, even sorry to interrupt you again, but the argument you were talking about for removing mercury vaccines, somebody did that yesterday. I was like, well, they took it out and autism should have gone down, did it? Like I was like, well, go look at the chart. And that's what I was trying to pull up earlier of the rise in the autism rates. It plateaued when they took it. It was like, it does this, it flattens out for a birth cohort for 4 years, and then it steeply goes back up. I was like, that's when they started removing it. And it's like, well, they removed it in 2001. I'm like, no, they didn't start even manufacturing lower dose mercury vaccines until 2002. And we, because we ask, and we email each other, we were still finding doses in
There you go.
vaccines. Yes. We were still finding doses of full dose mercury vaccines with expiration dates of 2007 in doctors' offices. And when, the ramp up again is as they took mercury out, they increased the aluminum in the schedule. So, yes, we did see a change. I've been looking for this and I have not seen anybody study it. But because my son was like the birth cohort right in the middle, that was the kind of, he got the mercury vaccine and then he didn't get any more. My observation, first of all, he has moderate autism. Everybody we know that has serious, profound autism is older than him. Everybody younger than him is more high functioning than him.
Yeah.
So I report, I haven't seen any data on this, but there's a change in the quality of autism when thimerosal began being removed. So I don't know how that plays into it. You have in the 90s are the serious kids. They're all in their 20s and early 30s now. And they're the ones that are nonverbal and wearing diapers and need serious help and are seriously injuring themselves. So the kids coming in now are much higher functioning, and they are going to school, and they can't advocate for themselves. They're the ones who can say, I'm high functioning, I'm autistic, it's no big deal. But they don't understand because we don't see these kids, but kids with profound autism are locked away in their parents' house and they're not up for people to see. So I think there's a change in the quality, and there was a change. It did, and the question is asked, well, did they pump up the aluminum to compensate so they wouldn't get caught? Because if they had let the autism rate go down, then everything would have been blown out into the public view. So
Yeah.
So I had that conversation yesterday. I was like,
There was a great study, and you may know the study because I tried to go back and find it, and I couldn't find it because I can't get the exactness of the study, but it came out in COVID. I want to say it was done in Australia, and the study essentially, and I'm totally paraphrasing this, but essentially it was based on people's beliefs.
The Taylor study?
It was based on people's beliefs, and it was basically saying that here are these guidelines and these things you do. It essentially was showing how people's beliefs in the vaccines was religious in nature, in the sense that I'm having a really hard time figuring out what to even say about it. It was a great study. Trust me. I'll have to figure out how to.
I think I remember it. It's not one that I would have keyed on because because it's feelings. I get really annoyed with the feelings and well, we feel that, but I was like, well, I don't care about what you feel. Show me some data. Give me a case series. What's happening in the real world? This country has fallen into feeling everything from here to there.
However, the unfortunate part of that, though, is that it is people's paradigms, so we can say, feelings, but they're paradigms that get in the way of them looking at the actual scientific facts. You can present someone who has a hardcore pro-vaccine paradigm with these same facts, and they don't look at it like it's facts. They look at it like it's made up. It's got to be fictional. You have to be making this up because it goes against my paradigm.
I just shared my screen with the chart. And this is, if you look at the 2010, 2012 birth cohorts, these are 12-year-olds that are reported in 2010 or 2012. So this was the birth cohorts during when they started taking the mercury out, and you can see the rise, and it plateaued, and then it started to rise again. So people can see that. Look, our biases are very strong. Our denial about the consequences of this, they're important. We need our doctors, because I talked to one doctor who said his daughter is one of the most famous vaccine autism cases, Hannah Poling. He's a Johns Hopkins neurologist. And when he came out, he did a lot of writing about his case. And he got a hold of me and he said, "You're one of the only people who gets this. I really appreciate what you're saying." Because I was making the point, I'm like, the media is trying to say that the vaccine has rights and that Hannah Poling was a poor receptacle of their super amazing product. And I'm like, this is about the child, not the vaccine. And he was like, "Thank you." So we got to be friends, and we still are. And we were talking once, and he said, Barbara Loe Fisher wrote to me in the before Hannah got sick. I mean, maybe before she was even born. Hopkins had assigned a vaccine article to him. He wrote about vaccines are great, blah blah blah. And he got a letter from Barbara Loe Fisher saying, "Here's the problems with what you have written." He said, and I threw it away immediately. Who's this crazy person? And he's like, I should have listened, because, their journey is, she was born, got hurt. Because he was a neurologist, he gave her every test under the sun. My husband at the time was putting roofs on houses. We did not have the resources that they did to try all this testing, but he found mitochondrial problems with her, and he found all sorts of stuff. So he had a case to take to the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, and they were compensated. And after they went public, when CNN said they were compensated, we were talking, and he said, when I got that letter, when I had all these other experiences, what I really went through was realizing that if I believe you, I can't do what I do anymore, because that means everything they've told me could be wrong. It means I may not know anything about medicine and the truth about what goes on in these kids. And that was profound for me, because when we say to doctors, "You gave my child brain damage for life. You are the reason my child died of SIDS," that is a existential problem for them. If how do I live knowing that I killed a baby, even if it was on accident? And it's it's a dilemma that is a spiritual problem, right? So
Yeah. Very, very good point. I mean, absolutely. And that is the crux of this entire argument and our challenges of getting things done, because you are dealing with people's belief systems, their paradigms of what is real for them. Switching gears just a little bit, I'd like you to touch upon where you feel we are right now as, we used to be health freedom, now we're MAHA, right? I still like to think health freedom because it's more specific to me, but let's talk a little bit about the newbies. Let's talk a little bit about Kennedy and where you feel things are going. Let's talk about some positives with that, because I'm really tired of all the negatives myself.
Well, if you've been a part of this journey for decades, like we have something to compare it to, right?
Yes.
People are coming in now who are very focused on just the COVID vaccine. The lies about COVID exposure, COVID disease treatments, and then can jump to the vaccine was bad. It didn't do good. And then jumping from that to it was a bioweapon. This was on purpose. Jumping to the logical progression of, I've got cancer. What do I do? Can I go back to my doctor? These are not, these are the same companies selling him the same thing. And I'm hearing that chemo might be, it's paralyzing to know. It shakes the foundation. What can you do? Because we are dependent. I've long called mainstream medicine my abusive boyfriend that I can't get out. Because I have been abused in the medical system. Like, I have a lot of bad stories. And you could be like, why didn't you sue? Like, I could have sued over a ton of this stuff. it had nothing to do with Chandler's injury, because it is a system that is set up to abuse, starting with the doctor's first day of medical school. They are hazed, they are sleep deprived, which is the first thing a cult does. You sleep deprive them, you bomb them with information. They have to, exhaust themselves. They're in debt that they can never, up to their eyeballs.
I understand that.
So they begin their process by taking abuse, and they learn to abuse the patient. They learn to look down on the mothers. They learn to call them anti-vax.
They're taught this God complex.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it is an abusive system. And how do I leave that? What do I go to? What's the alternative? Is coming, and that is coming to fruition, because we have now kind of a critical mass of doctors, of MDs who have left the system or been Wakefielded and injected from the system, which is a huge blessing. I liken that to getting fired from your job in the World Trade Center on September 1st.
Yeah.
Because
floating.
Yes. Yeah. What is happening right now is the mainstream medical monolith is disintegrating, kind of right along with the left-wing paradigm that has just too aggressively wanted to destroy the right and the president and whatever, to the point where cheating in lawfare was their only tool. And now the courts are like, you're crazy at this point. This is no longer an argument. And parents now see, like, the AAP had a hissy fit this week.
Yes, I saw that.
We are not going to lend our name to this.
We're going to do our own list.
We're going to do our own thing. They're like, we just switched places with them. Suddenly, our parents are in the room. Our doctors are in the room. And AAP is storming off. We're going to take our tea set and go home and have our own. We're going to invite the popular people. And we're like, it's cold outside. We're going to be inside now. You go outside and play. And there's some other great, the Dan doctors who came out of the aughts in understanding what was happening to these kids and leaving pediatrics, and kind of got involved in the Defeat Autism Now movement, which is the early years, have now reorganized under the MAPS organization, which is the Medical Academy of Pediatrics and Special Needs. And their conferences every year are growing, and they're training doctors to be real doctors and to treat the new childhood epidemics of autoimmune and neurological disorders. And so there's now a place to go to. And I have, I'm praying that AAP is replaced with, I was writing stuff 15 years ago. I was talking about how the autism epidemic was just getting bigger, and every year, every 4 years, we were hearing the rates go from 1 in 250 to 1 in 160 to 1 in 88 to 1 in 60, and now we're at 1 in 31, I think. And for years, we've been like, where does it end? At what point do you say there's a problem? And I'm starting to think and ask the question, how many healthy kids are left? Because this isn't just about autism anymore. Now we got asthma, we got ADD, and we've got childhood cancers, and we've got childhood obesity. And I thought we'd never get an answer to that question of how many healthy kids there were left. And then in 2010, when Obama was pushing medical reform and the Obamacare package, they actually did the study of 93,000 kids and found that 54.1% of kids were chronically ill, developmentally disabled,
right,
or obese. And the most disturbing thing about it was, like, less than half of the kids are healthy. And the most disturbing thing about the conclusion is that the solution to the problem was that children needed more access to the medical system, pediatric system, which was making them half of them sick, delayed, and obese. So it is the definition of failing up. And he got what he wanted, and we have Kennedy in one of the press conferences. I need to go back and find the stat for this. Said now that the new percentage is 64% of those kids.
I remember that. Yeah,
they're gonna go look. I'm gonna go look that up. So it's at no point are they gonna say okay, we time to abandon ship and build a new ship. And of course, Bernie Sanders, the opening of every hearing that he's in, is ranting and raving that we just need free healthcare. Like free healthcare.
Well, we definitely don't need jumpsuits. We don't need the jumpers. We don't need the jumpers. We know that. Crazy, crazy people.
So there is a place now for families to go, but now getting that covered and getting that, I've been waiting for more than 15 years for hyperbaric to get covered by insurance. It treats stroke, it treats all sorts of brain injuries, and they're only covering it for like elderly people who have wounds that won't heal. And we're like, this is a miraculous treatment.
Health insurance has always been an oxymoron.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's happening. Good things are happening. I had Kennedy is one of us, right? He figured out that he was vaccine injured, that his voice was taken by a mercury-containing flu shot, and he figured that out when he was litigating on it and found his diagnosis in the list of vaccine outcomes. And his has a child with asthma, and he, it's kind of, so it's interesting because we have, I don't know if you know Dr. Hank, who's on Scott Hankson, who's on Twitter. He figured out, he had a son who passed in his adulthood. He had childhood diabetes, and after his son passed, he started putting together all that he was learning about vaccines and figured out that his son was a vaccine reaction that he lost his life to. So I think the unwinding of this, there is more space for doctors to come down and realize that they've been a part of the problem. They didn't mean it. It's turning into something. That website, How Do Vaccines Cause Autism? I've spent a long time screaming at the top of my lungs, being like, "Hey, look over here." And when he was appointed the head of HHS, he got a hold of our groups and he said, "I want all the research." So that website and everything in it, all that went to Bobby. So he knows, and he has all the things. The arguments that you're talking about with the thimerosal removal, he knows all. He's
Right.
very good at navigating the waters, the vicious shark-infested waters of Washington, D.C., because it is a horrible and corrupt system. And so people are like, well, he hasn't done this and he hasn't done that. I'm like, well, give him 5 minutes because he hasn't even been there 6 months.
It's a ridiculous argument. It's one I hear so many times. I mean, Twitter can be a cesspool, so I get that. But there's so many opportunists that are among the newbies who really it feels like they're there only because they want to get their 15 minutes in this limelight, and that's it, because their argument makes no sense. Once again, you only have to have half a brain to realize that you can't come into Washington and say, okay, no more vaccines. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way.
And it wouldn't last.
No, it wouldn't.
You've got to tear it down brick at a time and build it brick at a time. I really feel what you're saying. We have been out here in the slog year after year, and the mercury removal, even, for example, we started advocating on that before I got here. That was a good 5 years. It was probably late 90s, 98 when you got here. When Lynn and the parents that came in before me were, Lynn Redwood.
Yes.
We're trying to get mercury free vaccines just stated as a preference for pregnant women and children.
Right.
And they wouldn't even do that. And it's taken her, I was so glad she was in the room. Emotional again. When that vote was taken on Thursday to remove mercury from vaccines.
Right.
Because she's 30 years she's been doing this,
Well, it's really been
her son's middle-aged at this point.
Yeah, it's really been the warrior moms. It's been the warrior moms driving this. It really has.
And the people who are saying, well, that doesn't mean we've got this problem. I'm like, I'm gonna be like, give us a break. This is 30 years of work. Let us just. We know this is the low-hanging fruit. This is not gonna, But it's already been said in the room by the chair of the committee, we have to look at the hepatitis B vaccine birth dose. Why are we giving this to every child and not just children of Hep B positive mothers? The fact
Right.
that he even said that first off the bat before any real discussion was taking place, that tells me that's going to be happening yet. And that's a part of Chandler's picture. First birth dose to hepatitis B set him on the path. So, like, I want to tell the new people, like, yes, you're not wrong. There should not be there's 10 things that need to change. Like I would just be like, if I had my list and whatever, I've already got 10 articles written on what they should do. And yes, the COVID vaccine should be long gone, but that's not how he's going to do it. And it has to stay gone. The fact that when he fired the ACIP, I was in tears when I heard that. I'm like, I'm so excited. He did that. That was bold and it was quick.
Absolutely.
And
it was very decisive.
It was very decisive. And it was what he said. He said from the beginning, we're going to get rid of conflicts of interest.
Yeah.
I interviewed Paul Offit, 15 years ago.
Oh my God. How did you stomach that? Oh my God.
He was so mean. He was so mean. He was
a horrible person. And Hotep doesn't even come across as intelligent as Offit does.
Yeah. And Offit, he in 2000, he was written up in that congressional report excoriating the people on the ACIP for their conflicts of interest. And they shouldn't have waivers. They were like, well, you sign a waiver. I'm like, you've just waived your ethics. How are parents supposed to trust you? And so there was an article written about him in Philadelphia Magazine, and had him holding a baby, and he looked like he was allergic to the baby. And it was all black and everything. It was a horrible picture. I was like, how did he even approve this? I guess they didn't let him. And so I called him, and my question basically was like, how do you feel about this picture even? It paints you so badly. And how, what's your answer to the report, from Congress saying that you shouldn't be doing this stuff? And he yelled at me. I said, you were reprimanded by Congress for it. He kept like, I was never reprimanded by Congress. And I was shaking. Like, I'm like little mom. I certainly wasn't lawyer mom yet at that point. And I was like, well, this is, how would you characterize it? And I really wasn't able to get out of the question anymore because he just kept yelling at me. And I was not reprimanded by Congress. And I was like, does he he said he didn't like the picture, but he liked the article. But the article basically was like talking about how his father was a shirt salesman and he was ashamed of him for, and he in the end, the article wrote that he admitted that he was just a salesman like his dad. He was just a vaccine salesman.
Interesting.
But I thought, well, how interesting, not even just that he made the admission, but that he had such shame for his father. He grew up and went through medical school. He had a father who launched him, and to have such open disrespect for your own father in the media, whether he was alive or not, because he sold shirts. I mean, he wasn't a bar fighter. He wasn't he wasn't a robber. He was an honest tradesman. And so it shows me how, again, the pride thing. Who do you think I am? How dare you? How dare you quote a congressional report about me? I don't know. God have mercy on his soul, because he is a piece of work who has lied his way through decades. So
he has been one of the central villains of this for so long. It's kind of like a DC comic, and he is the primary nemesis for the rest of us. So
Mark Blaxell, who we had a group called the Canary Party that started in 2011. That was the first kind of overtly political movement. It was a PAC to bring together all these disparate groups of autism parents and allergy parents and the new childhood epidemics, and what became kind of the health freedom movement that was out there among the healthy people, and this kind of became a core, and it's what became MAHA. It got folded into CHD, and then Bobby turned the whole thing out as MAHA. And Mark, who is my partner in that, he had written a story about Offit's vaccine, and the sales of it. and that they had sold the vaccine for $158 million. And Offit's response to that was, look, I had to share that with a lot of people. I only made $6 million. And I'm like, oh, only $6 million. Like, this is his, you're a vaccine millionaire and you treat parents with contempt and you hate us. And he has famous video of him. There's a father with his son, vaccinated son, who's in a wheelchair. And he approached him at lunch to ask him if he could interview him. And he just started, started cursing at him. And he was wearing his camera around his neck and he had the video on. So he just started screaming and cursing at the parent for even approaching him. So it's a dying paradigm, and everybody can see how fake it is now. And so we're looking for good doctors, because that question of how many healthy kids are left was also followed up by wise pediatricians rise up and take your profession back. And a lot of them are getting out that paradigm. And AAP threw the hissy fit this week that just made them look like, it made it look bad. It was not dignified. And so, hoping something beautiful can come out of the ashes, and that we can get it financed properly. And so that we don't have doctors losing their shirts by trying to give us real medicine. And ultimately, the fact that families like mine need to be compensated for doing the right thing, and vaccinating our kids and losing our careers. My career's done. My husband's he's still trying to get back to where he should have been at the time. And there has to be a place to not only stop hurting the kids in the future, but to clean up the mess, because we're dying off. The mothers in my cohort, we are losing them. And where these kids go and where these young adults go and who cares for them is important. And it's really heartbreaking. That's our biggest, everybody's biggest worry is what happens to my children when I die. And it needs to be attacked on a government level. There's a lot of private groups that are trying to come up with different structures to take care of these kids. So we'll see what happens, but I have hope now that something will happen, because Bobby he's killing it. He's doing a great thing, and the newbies who don't understand. And this is true in 2015, especially when they had all the bills come in. We had, especially in California, we had a bunch of successful political people come in and be like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do this and that. And you had seasoned families who had been working in the legislature for years that were getting stomped on by these new, passionate, excited people that were saying, look, I've already gotten 5 bills passed. I know how to do this. And we were like, you don't understand. This is different. You had a legal backstop that they could only go so far or you could sue them. We don't have that. They're allowed to kill our children and never be dragged into court. This isn't the same way. And they were very offended because they knew better. And so they kept running headlong into brick walls. And then once they were knocked unconscious by running into the wall we said was there, we kind of scraped them off the ground. They were like, what happened? And I'm like, pharma happened.
Well, we told you what happened.
You underestimate the evil that is there. And I think that in the next year, in the next political season, they got it and they came back and they did wonderful things. But it is a newbie rite of passage in this place of vaccine, whatever it is. They don't understand how big the monster is, and they don't understand how incredibly successful Bobby has been in 4 months. So, but we just,
well, I don't think they understand Bobby either, Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because people were like, he's bought off. I'm like, well, what? Money, cash? His wife is a famous TV person. He's a friggin' Kennedy. He can have money at his disposal. Women, like, he's got the beautiful wife. He's got, like, what are they buying him off with? Well, they're blackmailing him. Well, what? He doesn't care. He's a junkie, right? I mean, this guy had a heroin addiction for 15 years. His father was murdered on TV. Like, he has been in the depths of it. Is somebody going to come out and be like, you know what? He's a player. He liked the women. Like, yeah, everybody knows that. Like, all of his foibles and his disaster falling apart has been documented for decades. Like, he's not bribable and he's not blackmailable. So what does he have to gain by not going all the way with this? Like,
And they've never seen.
I heard him talk for 20 years. They haven't read.
Yes, exactly what you're saying there. I mean, I have had the absolute pleasure of meeting him twice, and having followed his career and listened to him, like you have for 15, 20 years, what have you. And I think you get to know his heart. You get to know that this man has a lot of character. He has compassion. He's incredibly intelligent. And he's been in this long enough to know the monster that you're talking about, to know how, like a tick, the head is burrowed and you got to have a way of getting that tick out of there. He knows how to get in there and take care of that. And that's what he's doing. And he's doing it in a very logical, very smart way. He's doing it in a systematic way. And, we just have to get the hell out of his way and let him do his job and support him and keep loving him for the stuff he's done for us. And just keep giving him that love and that support and that faith and the patience in the process, because he is moving us in that direction. We just have to realize it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in the first year, but the amount that he's done, even in the months that he's been in, is, I think, pretty miraculous.
He is incredibly skillful, and I've been enough of a position in his orbit to see how he moves into alignment with people. He will meet with anyone. He will talk with anyone. He will agree on the issues. He may have an incredible enemy in front of him, but if he agrees on one issue with them, he will seize that and build a relationship. And he works in good faith, and he doesn't, there's video about him. He was suing Donald Trump years ago in New York over land usage and real estate stuff. And Trump still gave him and his family a ride to Florida on his plane because he has the relationship building skills, and Trump does too, that you don't, he knows when to shut up, right? I'm like, there's basic arguments once you've been around for 20 years that we have to say. And watching the hearings, they throw a question at him and they wouldn't let him answer. And I'm like, I've got the answer. We know that answer. He's got an answer. And he would just say, yeah, that is a concern. And I was just like, oh, come on, Bobby, do it. Like, you can crush him right now in this moment. And he's like, no, he knows he's got to get them to vote for him. He's not out to crush people for his ego. So he's doing this very skillfully. And the idea that he's moved on and left us behind. He got nominated and immediately called the nerds who are following the research, and me being one of them, and said, give us all the research, because he's going to walk in the door to HHS armed with everything. And he knows on it, and just telling tells out of school about him. When you say that he's smart, he's more like a computer or a catalog. He just, if anything goes on, it's there.
Yeah.
He can talk about the stuff off the top of his head like crazy.
It is intimidating and impressive at the same time.
Yeah, the way he writes his books is he sits down with a notepad and writes with a pen and writes his books. Because it's already up there, and then he hands it off to his fact checkers, research assistants, and they will go and find the reference, and he'll say to them, it's in a paper, I think it was in this journal, and it had this, and there was this person attached to it, and they have to go find it and read it and go, oh yes, that is what it said. Because so he's not even sitting down, like I have to sit down and read the paper and then take notes on the paper. Whatever. He's just got it all up there. So it's he's not running roughshod over them like he could. He's not going in and being the authoritarian that is telling them what to do.
It is fun watching him now, though, in some of the meetings, because now that he's in a position, he's a little more anchored. He can come out a little bit more and say, hey, and so it's fun to watch him now better than it was in the initial stuff. Yes.
And he'll be able to do more of that as the years go on. And he's not doing it as well because that's not his job to make the argument. Like he's just hiring, like the ACIP meeting, watching that, because we watched ACIP for years, and the meetings are just horrible.
Yeah.
And they're not even discussions; they're just a bunch of bureaucrats. I feel like I'm watching a Soviet Politburo meetings. They all just agree with each other, and
That's not a bad example. Yeah.
There's no science involved. And just what I was watching, I didn't like everything that was said in it, but it was real conversation. It was real, scientists talking about the real issues and the real concerns and the data. And he's hiring people who can have that objective conversation. And having Lynn in the room, and Vicky, to both just say, hey, here's the parent perspective. Here's the, there was Messner, who was talking about, he thought they should leave mercury in the vaccine. He said the key phrase. He said, there has been no evidence of harm from mercury in this, which is that's 25-year-old talking point of the pediatricians. And there was a book called Evidence of Harm about this is the harm that's been covered up, and that's what Bobby had come out writing about out of the first gate. And we all, we're all in these groups together, and we're like, oh my God, what did he just say? Is he kidding me? Like, where has he been under a rock, in a cave for the last 25 years? So the fact that he brings that up, and then we are in the room now to relitigate these discussions. And Lynn, in that instance, responded to him. That's what was thought at the time. And the Institute of Medicine in 2003 said blah, blah, blah. And then in 2005, we finally had the evidence of harm. And the Perdo, it was a paper I hadn't even heard of before. I went and looked it up. Perdo found this and this, and he found the brain inflammation, and he found the toxic mercury in the brain. And that she could go back 25 years to discuss the research that he hadn't heard of yet. It's a great thing. So Bobby didn't have to do it. It was done in the room where it's supposed to be done.
Yeah.
So he's got to rebuild the infrastructure that will make healthy decisions, and people don't want to wait for that. And I get it. I'm impatient too. I want this to be over. I would like to retire from whatever this weird vocation is. So
yeah, you mentioned 2019. I was at least halfway, if not 60% done with my book in 2019, and at the end of 2019. And then
what's the book on?
The book's called Vaccines Point by Point, and the Skyhorse is who I have looking at it right now. And the unfortunate thing is they've been looking at it for a while, and I can't seem to get an answer. So,
they're slow. They're overwhelmed with work, and they've got a lot of projects, but they take a long time.
And what happened too was for at least one whole year, the person I'm in discussion with was like, we're doing Bobby's campaign, so I'm putting everything on a back burner, and I'll get back in touch with you when this is over. So then it was like for a year it was on the back shelf, and I should have went and looked for another publisher, but I've got too much going on in my life to have to try and focus on this. So I'm kind of just hoping it unfolds. But like you're talking about being fed up. When COVID, especially towards the end of 2000 or 2020, I was so done with everything. I had to put the book down. I couldn't touch it. I couldn't look at anything vaccine related because I just felt nauseous with all the vaccine stuff because, like you, like I, doing all this stuff from especially when things ramped up in 2015 up to 2020, I saw this coming. You saw this coming. We knew that this was right around the corner, that something was going to happen. They were building up to something, and you could feel it in the air. You could see it in their actions. And so from the end of beginning of 2020 to about 2022, I hardly did anything with my book. I just kind of sat on it because I was so tired of this whole conversation. The whole thing was just making me so angry, and it was making me an angry person, and I didn't like that. And so then I finally picked it back up, and I wrapped up the book. It's all done now. But I, like you, would like nothing better than to have this not be a conversation. And I'll tell you something. I made this point on a tweet, an X. I'm not sure how you call it now. Recently about, if they would just put the philosophical exemption back in every single state, I don't know if I would even be in this conversation anymore, because at that point I would say at least you're allowing everybody to make their own personal choices without having to make it into something. If you would at least put that back in, you would probably save yourself a big headache, because we could stop talking about it. Now, that does not excuse what's happened as far as damage goes. And then we have a whole separate argument about pursuing damages, like you said, for parents like yourself who've gone through this. But for the personal choice part of it, you would at least now have, it's great to have the religious one, but the philosophical one is the one that's the best, because it just says it doesn't matter what my religion is. It doesn't matter what my belief system is. I just say no. It just says that. And that's the one they immediately got rid of course. That was the first thing they got rid of, because they knew that. So I want to
really, it is the same thing as a religious exemption, because it's worldview. What's your worldview? What is your conscience?
Yeah.
I had a colleague who, I'm a very strong Christian. I have a whole website dedicated to the biblical perspectives on vaccination, especially the abuse of aborted fetal cell vaccination. When you've got a pro-life Christian who is absolutely 100% horrified at the idea that they would have to buy and inject a product of abortion, and they cannot say that I can't do that. Like, there's no First Amendment way around that. You cannot force somebody to participate in something that they believe is murder. However, if I've got my girlfriend next to me who's agnostic, and she doesn't think this is about what God says or being obedient, but her conscience says it's not okay for me to poison my child, why do I have a right to follow my conscience and she doesn't? So I've always looked at them as the same thing, but putting it in a framework of conscientious objection.
Yes.
People of conscience, no matter what the source of that is, because it's a worldview. It's not just a prescriptive religion with a text. So,
well, and I know you're very familiar with this, because I've been to that website you're talking about for the religious exemptions, and there's ways through this mire, but it was always basically, well, do you have a letter from your priest or those types of things? And that's where having the philosophical over the religious is preferable to people who don't want to have to lie or stretch the truth and say, yes, I've got this. Start kind of wrapping up here a little bit. And I just wanted to kind of definitely give the last word to you to say, what you think about where we are, where we're going. Any last minute words you want to give to those out there who are struggling with the same thing?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about that. I mean, where we are, if you told me a year ago we would be here, I would have been like, yeah, I love your fantasy, but it's a big deal. Right now I'm part of a group of organizations, a lot of them, who have given testimony to Trump's religious commission that he needs to write an executive order that will make sure that each state is offering an exemption and refuse to financially support the states that are violating the First Amendment in this way. We have a problem in that argument with a 1905 Supreme Court judgment in Massachusetts versus Jacobson that gives the states compelling interest to violate the First Amendment. And it is something that should be overturned. It also has been used to justify the forced sterilization of Black women and female criminals. And it is long overdue that it needs to end. The early 20th century kind of racist paradigm of Planned Parenthood, and that there are those who are lesser and that there are those who should be wards of the state. It really makes everybody a ward of the state, and that needs to go. for a number of reasons. So Jacobson needs to be overturned. We have right now as well, which is in the works, and I think it is working. Many of us have been meeting with legislators in order to get the liability protection given to vaccine makers by the 1986 Act overturned.
Absolutely.
Last year, we had a bill from Representative Gozar that would strip that liability protection. It would also strip the liability protection for the COVID-19 vaccines by getting rid of that in the countermeasures, emergency countermeasures
Right.
law.
Right.
Yes, and so they would have to. And to me, this is the key point. And I've long said I don't think I'm allowed to die until vaccine makers can be sued. This 86 Act was probably the most, since slavery, this was the worst legal decision ever made and the most destructive to our country, because now you've given the chemical industry a license to kill people for profit and never have to face a consequence. So to say that it is a failed experiment is putting it mildly. So that bill came out last fall and expired with that session. A number of us have been going back to it. Had 30 co-sponsors, so there was support for it. But of course, last year, somebody shot the president, and there was a whole lot going on, and so I didn't
Wrong year.
Yeah, wrong year
Yeah.
for this. So there was no traction on it. So it looks like we're going to be able to get that reintroduced, and if that's the case, then that will be the bulk of my focus for the year, on flogging people to everybody pile on this, because when that happens and people can bring suit, we can find out what these companies really know about the danger of their product.
Right.
Because this is the mechanism not only to get them to pay money for doing wrong things, it's the mechanism that they have to tell the truth. They've got to open up their books. We've got to know what they know, because as of now, they could have 10,000 memos over every vaccine saying, oh my gosh, it's crazy how much autism this vaccine causes. We can't believe we're getting away with this. But nobody can get to this. Nobody can see it. They don't have to give up those papers. So even if it's just for the discovery that we get to have in these lawsuits, it will change the vaccine program. It will change the health of the country, because they'll pull their vaccines that are too dangerous voluntarily, and they've already said that. They're like, well, we can't be on the market then.
Right.
So like, if your business model is built on poisoning babies, why do you expect anybody to do business with you?
Same argument for glyphosate, right?
Yeah. So and the other part of that is that doctors will have to learn how to treat these illnesses again. The fact that doctors still don't know vitamin A for measles, is dumb. Because the problem that we have is you won't be evaluated for something unless you are unvaccinated for it. So we have cases where somebody comes in with disease X, but they've been vaccinated for disease X, so they don't consider it. And they have a horrible case. It doesn't get treated because doctors have taught, well, if you've got the vaccine, you can't get it. So, and they use phrases like breakthrough cases instead of what it is, primary vaccine failure.
Exactly.
You get a COVID vaccine and stuck with the disease, primary vaccine failure. And doctors don't even know that phrase. So the shell game goes away, and doctors are going to have to doctor for real. So that, to me, that is the end game of this. I get to go to my grave in peace if they can't get away with poisoning babies and not having to face a courtroom. That is the biggest deal. If that happens, you will know it. I will make sure you know it. I will demand to come on the show and tell everybody about it. My next project actually is with James Lyons Weiler. So I built this website 2 years ago, How Do Vaccines Cause Autism, with all the research that I can say, oh, here's how vaccines cause autism. No, you're lying when you say there's no research. And it turned out to be helpful in bringing a lot of doctors over who were saying, because they were saying, maybe these parents are right. And then I would say, hey, I saw your comment. Here you go. And they go, oh, we didn't know about any of this stuff. And it was the thing that gave them permission to start taking this seriously. So what I have never done is that, we have 25, 30 years of really great critiques, CDC and AAP. You'll hear people say they have thousands of papers saying the vaccines don't cause autism. It's been debunked. It's been, it's ridiculous that you still think that.
Yeah.
And I'll say, here's 236 papers that show links. And they're like, that's all crap. CDC, AAP, blah, blah. Well, CDC and AAP have 37 papers that they use to say that all questions have been asked and answered. Like, there's never been a pertussis vaccine and autism study, but still, that doesn't matter. All questions asked and answered.
Yep.
On things that have never been studied at all. And what we don't have is a one-stop source to go back and say, hey, AAP, these things that you're promoting don't say what you claim they say.
Right.
And this is junk science, and this is the parents' response to you and why we don't trust you. And for the parents who want to know that they're using junk science to make claims, here's our argument. So I'm launching a new site that we're going to start building. I'm actually a little bit started pulling papers together that will catalog hopefully all of the main responses and critiques of these 37 papers, so that parents can see, like, doctors aren't gods. The AAP is not, they do not have this flawless argument. The one that drives me crazy is that there's a paper put out in 2007 that is looking at thimerosal and neurological outcomes in 7 to 10-year-olds. And they put the paper out, and all the headlines said, once again, vaccine autism relationship is debunked. There's no association, and then we got a hold of the paper, and the third sentence of the paper says, autism was not studied in this cohort. So it was not an autism paper. They looked at a lot of neurological outcomes, but autism wasn't one of them. And then the conclusion is like, wow, you really should study autism as well in breast mercury outcomes. And this paper is still batted around as, mercury. And so, but parents don't know that. And they don't know how to read deep in the paper that shows, oh, it actually does cause learning disorders and ADHD, but we're not going to mention that at the top of the paper or in the public. So it's a lot of fraud. So we have I'm making a one-stop shop to hear all of these arguments on their bad research, their conflicts of interest. Thompson, who did the paper, also came out publicly and admitted that he had tanked, they had tanked the research that the head of CDC's vaccine safety branch had done a different paper on young Black males and MMR. It became the subject of the movie Vaxxed. And they got into a room and just started throwing medical records away to try to unfind the link they found between Black males having 3 times the autism outcomes after MMR. So hopefully Jack's going to help me. Toby Rogers, we're going to drill down on all this because all of this information that's critical to of the AAP CDC claims, it's disparate. There's books, there's it's just all over the place.
Right.
So hey, we need a one-stop shop that people can hear the main critiques of these. So that's going to be the next thing, and it's going to be called Responding to the AAP. Responding to AAP.com. So that's the next project.
Let me know about that as soon as that gets solidified, because that's excellent. And James is a great resource. Toby's a great resource as far as that goes. Well, Ginger, I had a lot of fun with this. I could probably talk for the next 3 or 4 hours, but I don't know if anybody would ever watch it if that was the case. So we'll definitely have to do this again and talk about the new website and talk about any other happening on the political scene. So thanks for coming on here. Thanks for sharing with everybody. I hope everybody who's watching has gotten some great information from our OG of the moment, Ginger.
Thank you very much. And if people want to follow me on a regular basis,
yes,
I read on Substack at gingertaylor.substack.com. And I'm at Twitter under Combating Autism.
Combating Autism. And that Adventures in Autism blog, is that's still up and going, right?
It's not going. It's up, but it was sunset in 2021 when my
Gotcha.
son became an adult, and I was like, okay, I'm going to shift away from writing about him toward focusing more on the political stuff.
Gotcha. All right, Ginger, once again, thanks a lot for joining us. I'm going to sign you out here and then sign off to the show. So once again, I appreciate you being on here. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody for hanging out and watching this information. I will make sure that I put into below the videos on all the different formats, all of the different sites where you can find Ginger's work. Ginger, once again, thank you for being on the show, and for everybody, I'll see you on the flip side. Bye-bye.